In the shadows of a remote mountain range, Elena and Victor discover a hidden truth, one that could cost them everything. As the storm closes in, secrets unravel, and survival is no longer a guarantee. Trust fractures. What are they willing to sacrifice? Elena Klein, a determined, no-nonsense journalist in her mid-30s, Elena is driven by a relentless pursuit of truth. Her sharp instincts and fearless attitude mask a deep trauma from her past, pushing her to uncover the darkest secrets, no matter the cost. Victor Hayes, a seasoned mountain guide in his early 40s, Victor is an expert in navigating treacherous terrains. Haunted by personal loss, his quiet demeanor hides a man who's seen too much, and he knows the unforgiving nature of the wilderness, yet something about this journey feels different. The opening of Ashmere Cave yawned beneath a curtain of fog, hidden deep in the frostbitten forest of northern Alberta. No signs, no warnings, just a steel gate twisted off its hinges and the cold breath of the earth spilling upward. Elena Morin, an experienced speleologist with a taste for forgotten places, crouched at the entrance, checking her gear with the ease of habit. Her partner, Caleb Thorne, was less methodical. He bounced on his heels, headlamp flickering over limestone formations like a moth drawn to flame. "This place isn't on any registry," he muttered, voice muffled behind his scarf. "You sure it's not just a sinkhole?" Elena smirked. "Then we'll be the first to map it." That's the point. The cave had emerged in whispers online, a strange collapse, a local vanishing, a drone lost mid-flight. No official reports. Just stories. The kind Elena lived for. They clipped into their rappelling lines and began the slow descent. The narrow shaft widened unexpectedly, revealing a cavern far older and deeper than anticipated. Fungi glowed faintly on the walls, illuminating carvings half buried in calcite, symbols, maybe, or warnings. "I don't like this," Caleb muttered, pausing. But Elena pressed forward. Above them, the light from the entrance faded into mist. The silence thickened. The air was cold, not cave cold, but deeper, unnatural. And as the rope unspooled behind them, it felt like something below had tugged first. Their boots hit the cavern floor with a soft crunch. Salt? No, ash. A fine, pale dust coated every surface, muting their footsteps and smothering the echoes. Caleb's breath hitched as he scanned the walls. The carvings were clearer here, etched deep into the stone with strange precision. Circles intersected by jagged lines, skeletal figures twisted in unnatural poses. Elena ran her gloved fingers over one. These weren't made by erosion. Someone carved them, ages ago. Someone who never left, Caleb replied, his voice low. They moved deeper, lights carving tunnels through the gloom. The path sloped down unevenly, branching off into yawning tunnels. The air thickened with the smell of damp stone and something else, metallic, sour, like rust and decay. Elena marked their route on the cave map she'd begun drawing, but the terrain refused to stay consistent. Tunnels curved unnaturally, angles felt wrong. Even her compass spun slightly, hesitating between north and nowhere. Then the sound came. A low, rhythmic thudding, like a distant heartbeat muffled through stone. Caleb stopped mid-step. "Is that water?" "No," Elena whispered. "Listen closer." There were whispers beneath it, faint as breath, unintelligible, but insistent. They both froze, ears straining. Then something skittered across the rocks behind them. A pebble bounced, then another. They turned. Nothing. But the shadows didn't fall the way they should. And one of them, just for a second, moved when the others didn't. The tunnel narrowed before opening abruptly into a vast chamber. Their headlamps swept across jagged formations that jutted like broken teeth. In the center, the ground dipped into a smooth, circular depression, unnaturally smooth, as if shaped by hands rather than water. Then came the eyes. Not real ones, but carved into every inch of the walls, hundreds of them, some human-shaped, others grotesquely warped. Some were gouged out. Others stared back with maddening symmetry. Elena swallowed hard. "This isn't natural," she said, her voice echoing too loud in the silence. Caleb stepped into the center of the room, drawn by something he couldn't name. A gust of air, impossibly cold, rose from the hole beneath his feet. The wind whispered again, no longer random, no longer faint. "Elena." She turned, but he wasn't looking at her. He was looking at the ground. A small pile of objects sat in the dust, too clean, too recent. A cracked helmet. A flashlight. A torn strip of red fabric. Caleb knelt, brushing away ash to reveal a name etched into the plastic, D. Mercer. "That's one of the missing divers," Elena murmured. "They were never found." Caleb's headlamp flickered. And for a heartbeat, something stood behind Elena in the light, tall, angular, watching. Then it was gone. The room seemed to breathe, the walls shifting ever so slightly as if alive, pulsating in time with the steady thrum of Elena's heartbeat. She could feel a cold, pervasive pressure in the air. The whispers, once faint, had grown louder, like an indistinct murmur just beyond her grasp. She shook her head, trying to push the growing sense of unease out of her mind. "Caleb, we need to leave," Elena said, her voice tight. But Caleb was still kneeling beside the pile of remnants, transfixed. His fingers brushed against the edge of the cracked helmet, his eyes distant. He didn't hear her. Or perhaps he didn't care. "Elena, it's all connected," Caleb muttered, as if to himself. His fingers traced the name etched into the helmet. "Mercer, they were down here too." Suddenly, he stood, his body stiff with resolve. "We need to go deeper. It's the only way." Elena felt a chill run down her spine. "What are you talking about?" But Caleb wasn't listening. He moved toward the darkened passageway that led deeper into the cave, the narrowness of it swallowing his form. The whispers grew louder, filling her ears. They beckoned. She stepped forward, hesitant, but something in her pulled her to follow. Without warning, Caleb turned sharply. His face was pale, his eyes wide and wild. "It's not just them, it's us too," he gasped. Elena felt her stomach twist, the blood draining from her face. She didn't understand. What was he trying to say? Suddenly, the ground beneath her feet shifted. A low rumble echoed, and the walls seemed to move, creeping closer, as if the cave itself was alive, closing in on them. She took a step back, her heart racing. "We need to leave now." But Caleb didn't respond. His eyes were fixed on the darkness ahead. He was already descending into it. The air was colder now, sharper. James and Sarah moved cautiously through the narrow passageway, their footsteps echoing ominously off the jagged walls. They could feel the weight of the mountain above them, a constant pressure, a reminder of how small and fragile they were. James paused, glancing at Sarah. "We need to find a way out, or we're going to be trapped here forever." His voice was barely more than a whisper, swallowed by the darkness. Sarah nodded, her face pale in the dim light. She clutched her flashlight tighter, its beam cutting through the thick darkness. "We'll find a way. We have to." A soft, distant sound cut through the silence. A low rumble, like the mountain itself was groaning. Sarah's heart skipped a beat. "Did you hear that?" she asked. James nodded, his eyes narrowing. "We need to move." The rumbling grew louder, vibrating through the ground beneath their feet. Something was happening, something they couldn't see, but could feel. They hurried down the narrow path, but every step seemed to lead them deeper into the mountain's dark heart. The rumble persisted, growing stronger as they moved deeper. James and Sarah quickened their pace, the sense of urgency pressing against them. The narrow passage seemed to stretch on forever, the walls closing in, their footsteps echoing louder with every step. "Do you think it's an avalanche?" Sarah asked, her voice tinged with fear. "I don't know," James replied, his breath shallow. It doesn't sound like one. Ahead, the faintest glow appeared, dim but unmistakable. It beckoned them forward. Without a word, they pushed on, drawn to the light, desperate for a sign of safety. As they rounded a sharp corner, the passage opened into a small chamber. The glow came from bioluminescent fungi clinging to the wet walls. For a moment, it was almost peaceful, a surreal calm amidst the growing chaos. But then, the ground trembled again. This time, the light flickered, casting eerie shadows across the chamber. James gripped Sarah's arm, his heart pounding. "We need to move, now." They turned, but the passage behind them was already beginning to collapse. The mountain was closing in, trapping them further inside. Panic surged through Sarah as the passage crumbled behind them, dust filling the air. They had no choice but to move forward. The small chamber felt suffocating now, the glow from the fungi flickering ominously. "Where do we go?" Sarah gasped, her voice strained. James scanned the chamber, his mind racing. The walls seemed to be closing in on them, the light from the fungi the only source of guidance. To the left, there was a narrow opening, barely visible in the dim light. Without hesitation, James grabbed Sarah's hand and pulled her toward it. "Through here," he said, his voice tight. "We don't have time." They squeezed through the narrow opening, the rocks scraping against their bodies. The passage beyond was even tighter, forcing them to move slowly, carefully. Every step felt like it might be their last. The rumbling continued, relentless, and now it sounded different, closer, more immediate. It was as though the entire mountain was alive, shifting around them. The air felt heavy, charged with something they couldn't quite explain. Each breath was more labored than the last, the atmosphere thick with dread. Ahead, another faint light appeared. It was barely perceptible, but it was something. A thread of hope, fragile but real. They pressed on, praying it would lead to safety. The light grew brighter as they crawled deeper into the narrow passage. The rumble of the cave seemed to fade into the background, replaced by an eerie silence that stretched around them like a shroud. The glow ahead became more distinct, casting long shadows on the jagged walls. "Do you think we're close?" Sarah whispered, her voice barely a breath. James didn't respond right away. His focus was entirely on the light. It was pulsing now, almost rhythmically, as though it had a life of its own. He tried to push the unease gnawing at him aside, but it lingered, like a constant presence in the back of his mind. "Keep moving," James finally said, his voice firm. "We're getting somewhere." The air grew colder as they approached the source of the light, their breaths forming small clouds in the icy atmosphere. Sarah shivered, her fingers tightening around James's hand. She didn't trust the cave anymore, didn't trust the feeling of being led deeper into the earth. The passage widened into a larger chamber, and there it was, an underground lake, its surface reflecting the pulsating light. It was tranquil, almost serene, but the tension in the air was palpable. Something was off. The stillness seemed unnatural, too perfect in its isolation. "What is this place?" Sarah murmured, taking a hesitant step forward. James's eyes scanned the lake's edges, and that's when he saw it, something moving beneath the surface, just out of sight. The movement beneath the lake's surface was subtle, like a ripple brushing against the stillness, but James couldn't shake the feeling that something was lurking just out of view. He stepped closer to the water, his eyes narrowing as he tried to catch any sign of what lay below. "James," Sarah whispered, her voice strained. "We need to leave. Now." But James didn't move. His gaze was fixed on the lake, drawn in by the strange, magnetic pull of whatever was waiting there. His heartbeat quickened, the sound in his ears louder than the quiet murmurs of the cave. There, beneath the glassy surface, something shifted, a figure, long and twisted, just out of reach. The glow of the pulsating light reflected in the water, illuminating what seemed to be a human-like shape, but elongated and distorted in ways that defied logic. Sarah's breath hitched, and she grabbed his arm, pulling him back. "We have to go. Now." Her voice cracked with fear. James finally tore his gaze away from the lake, his mind racing. Something was wrong, so wrong. They had been led here, to this very moment, but for what purpose? He took one last glance at the water, and the figure beneath it seemed to reach up, stretching toward him, as if it was waiting. Without another word, he turned and grabbed Sarah's hand, pulling her away. The air felt heavier now, as if the cave itself was closing in around them. The pulsating light was fading, and with it, the strange sense of inevitability that had been driving them forward. They had to escape. But the question remained, what had they truly uncovered? And was it already too late? The cave seemed to close in around them as they hurried through the narrow passage, the sound of their footsteps echoing off the walls. James felt a cold sweat trickle down his neck, his heart pounding in his chest. The feeling of being watched was overwhelming, suffocating. He could still hear the whispers in his mind, the pull of something deeper, darker. "James, please," Sarah's voice trembled beside him. "We're almost there. Just a little further." He nodded, though his mind was racing with thoughts he couldn't shake. They had seen it, whatever it was in the water, reaching toward them, waiting. It felt like they were being hunted, as if they were the prey in a game they couldn't escape. They stumbled through the last stretch of the cave, the entrance just ahead, but the walls seemed to grow tighter with each step. The air grew thicker, and the eerie light that had guided them began to flicker out, one pulse at a time. Finally, they emerged from the darkness, the cold air of the outside world hitting their skin like a slap. But the terror didn't fade. James turned back, scanning the cave entrance, as if expecting something to emerge from the shadows. The lake's still surface haunted him, the figure beneath it forever etched in his mind. "Is it over?" Sarah asked, her voice raw from the fear and exhaustion. James didn't answer. He only stared back into the cave, feeling the weight of the presence they had uncovered, something ancient, something that could never be fully escaped. The ground trembled beneath their feet. Then, silence. It wasn't over.